Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Nitro RX podcast. I am one of your hosts, as always, Thiemo and Nabila, and I'm joined once again by my brilliant co-host, Nabila. How are you?
I am doing well. How about yourself, Timo?
Pretty good, thank you.
That's awesome. And this week we have special guest and we're joined by Tom Williams. How you doing, Tom?
Hey, yeah, good to see you guys again. Yeah, I'm doing good. Just in the middle of Michigan, just come from Detroit, all the way up to our first event this year.
That's awesome and super exciting. So I know you're in the freezing cold weather of Detroit, which I think will lead us perfectly into talking about Alberta this weekend. What were your first thoughts on this weekend, Timo?
I thought it was quite a good sequel for what we had the previous round in Quebec a couple of weeks beforehand. So, as we keep saying with Nitro, every round of the season it keeps building and building, and sometimes we have a little bit of a not a dip necessarily, but like a soft reboot, and then that was perfectly what we needed for 2023 for kicking off with that. So, I think I enjoyed Alberta more than Quebec, but nothing against Quebec.
Oh, absolutely. And what about you, Tom? From obviously you come from a rally background, you've done a lot of ice driving out in Sweden and things like that. Would you be up for trying to get out on the ice in one of the Nitro Canada rounds at some point?
Of course, they stepped it up in a big way for ice driving. I think mainly to do with the tires that were driven away and with how many studs there were on each tire and how big they were. Like, it wasn't just a normal ice race, it was like serious, with that much power and that deep of studs on a full polished ice rink track. It's yeah, it'll be a lot of fun, and the way those guys race, it's a good thing going.
No, definitely
Absolutely.
did. And we also had a little bit of more kind of Nitro action-ish in between the two rounds because Travis was at the Race of Champions. Didn't go his way, unfortunately, but it looked like he had a lot of fun. And I think judging from how he did in Quebec, Nabila, might have helped him when he got to Alberta because he did a bit better this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. I think it ended up being a pretty solid weekend for him. And it was nice to see drivers that kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say struggled, but for lack of better words, yes, they did struggle in Quebec. They kind of found their own in Alberta, which was nice. And we definitely saw a little bit of a mix up in the field. And also how they changed their layout. That was very interesting
Track
to
layout
see.
or race weekend layout because they kind of
Race
did a little bit
weekend
of both.
layout, like let's be real, I struggled to keep up with what was going on, and then all of a sudden there was like double battle brackets. I mean, awesome that they're definitely taking the crowd into account.
I think it is one of those strengths of Nitro Rallycross as well that whilst, okay, it can get a little confusing maybe at times, not necessarily confusing, but you've got to pay more attention maybe is the kind of way of putting that. But it still shows that they can change these things on the fly and it works pretty well. Like we talked a bit at the very beginning of the season that they had a few things, they changed it by round two, and there's been a few other little changes over the course of the season. And then this weekend, we had like the biggest crowd ever for a rallying event in North America, and they thought, well, we've got to capitalize on that while we can, and so they added that extra battle bracket for the Sunday to keep things just to make sure that the crowd got their money's worth essentially. And you just think if that was not necessarily a different rallying category, but just different motorsport category, you probably wouldn't get that. You'd maybe get like, oh, you know what you do, and then you have like 3 years before they actually do that, and it'd be too late by then.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has that kind of adaptability that Nitro has in any other racing series. I mean, even you look at something like FIA, the Rallycross series that they have, nothing's really as adaptable. I mean, they have strict guidelines, they have strict rules, and it's not to say that Nitro has no rules. Of course they do. They still have to follow certain kind of regulations, but they have that ability of consistently changing things, which is completely different. Like you can't go to the UK and find that sort of stuff. So what Travis is doing with this series and like what he's kind of brought about and the team behind Nitro, it's really incredible to have that kind of adaptability straight away, and you can make things different without it really being too much of a hassle to drivers, but also gives the drivers more time out there. Like, what about you, Tom? If you had a change one day from, so your normal Saturdays, your battle brackets, and then finals and stuff on Sunday, would you appreciate that kind of change as a driver, or do you find that, I guess, in a thing like rallycross, like, do you find it different, or would it bother
Uh,
you?
I think, of course, I wouldn't find it ideal, so I'll do the
Mhm.
best I can. But it's the same for everybody, and it's nice to always have a change up, especially the way motorsport is now. Like Formula One with simulator riders being so good. based on one car and go. It's kind of nice to throw a curveball in there and just change it all up a bit, and it suddenly makes it more of a race. You don't know who's going to win. Could be this, could be that, and it just makes it a bit more entertaining, I think.
No, definitely. I think one of the other things that we had from Quebec that was different to Alberta and Nabila was that we were kind of missing a key element of Nitro RX for in my opinion, at Quebec. I think that's because, like you said, like we were saying, first time in this environment, so maybe don't risk it too much to start off with. But we didn't just have a jump this weekend, we had a proper jump.
Oh yeah, that was crazy. I mean, just watching it, it's just crazy how these cars are capable of doing what they're doing, to be completely honest. I know they're obviously built for that, but you don't really see jumps like that in rallycross on a normal basis. It's very much a nitro kind of thing to involve those jumps, and on the ice too. It's just awesome. I would love at some point in my life to get a ride around one of these tracks, like just for fun, you know.
I'll say Kris Meeke driving that car by any chance?
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw he launched it into his first battle bracket over that jump, and at least he had a pretty solid weekend. We had high hopes for Kris Meeke coming into the year, and finally, you know, we're finally seeing something. So I'm happy about
your tough
that.
love from previous race reviews has finally gotten to him, and he's taken it to heart.
Absolutely. But yeah, what about you? Did you figure any other things this weekend that definitely were something to talk about, you know?
Well, I think one of the things that everyone wasn't too sure about, but then as soon as the racing did start, became a very obvious change, was just the massive change in delta time with the Joker lap when it was added on. Because normally, I think the most we've had is maybe 6 or 7 seconds at a push, you know? And here we had around 14 seconds on one of the days, and it went up to, I think, to 18 seconds at one point, depending on how well you drove a lap. And that was just an insane amount of number. I mean, you think about that in just F1 terms, never mind rallying. It's years away from anyone else. And the fact that you still got a lot of battle brackets and a lot of the races still being so close with less than a second between the two cars after they have to do all that was just an interesting new dynamic to add to Nitro RX and making that, again, that extra level of spice for it.
Absolutely. What about you, Tom? What did you think from that Joker, like the Joker lap on Quebec compared to the others? I mean, have you actually done a rallycross event yourself?
No, I haven't actually. I've always been on the cusp of doing one. I was trying to get something sorted for Phoenix and Glen Helen last year, but it's just trying to do it properly and doing it for the right budget and sponsors. But yeah, for sure, it takes a bit of time to get used to the Joker lap and how it can change different tracks. Sometimes it can be a big thing, sometimes it can be a small thing. But yeah, on the recent race just then, it definitely changed it up for sure. But it was also interesting, the kind of ice dust, how that was coming into play on the first Canadian round, how that became such a big thing. Like once you get a car out, it's like like a race in the dunes and the sand. If you have a car out front, it's the same thing with ice. If it's that cold, you have an ice storm.
You don't really expect that. You say if you've got really dry gravel, you expect like dust clouds and stuff, but no one really thinks about the fact that when you get ice involved, that similar things can happen and visibility can somewhat be reduced. And also having that many cars together on a track at any given time, especially in the finals and things like that, that plays massive differences. Like you want to be that car in the front.
Exactly.
So we saw that a couple of times in the finals, I think, where they were going through the first slalom, and you were just kind of edge of your seat, like, "Ooh, are they all going to make that through there?" Just about. That's it, kind of very finely, I think. But again, I think you don't know quite how close that's going to be until you actually do it, and you need to do it to find out, because otherwise, what's the point?
Absolutely. Tom, did you have any more to add on what you thought about this weekend?
Well, I'm jealous, and I'd like to be there. But I can't be that jealous because I was testing and doing our own test over in New Hampshire, up O'Neill's that way, at O'Neill's Rally School, and they had a Brodex where I usually test in upstate New York, near the workshop was not cold enough, and then a bit further north and accidentally got the coldest place on the planet, like in Washington. I think it was Fahrenheit 110, minus 110. Up on the mountain there. So that was pretty cold.
That's disgusting. I did hear about the fact that yesterday it was like one of the coldest. I think I think I saw it translated to 70-something Celsius, minus 70-something Celsius, just for, the conversion there for you, Thiemo, and for anyone else that doesn't speak Fahrenheit. But that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So you're not going there on holiday then, Nabila?
Absolutely not. What about you, Tom? Are you there right now with it being that cold, or is it better today?
No, so we've gone into Detroit a couple of days later and just went around like the Ford Museum and all these kind of places, which was amazing. There's been like 1 or 2 degrees, like 32 Fahrenheit, so it's not too bad actually. And apparently, coming up to this rally, it's not going to be as cold as I thought. There's snow coming in, then it ices, and it melts. So I have no idea what's going to happen.
But yeah, going back to the ice of Alberta, I think it was pretty cold there. I'm pretty sure people were colder than expected.
Really cold up that way.
Yeah.
It was cool to have the rallycross up in Canada. I think that's just changed it up, and for those guys who enjoy ice sports so much, it makes sense to take it to the guys over there, and they love it. Snowmobiles, ice snowmobiles, they do anything motorsport with ice, so you can think of a better place to have it.
I suspect Travis might have known what he was up to there.
Oh, yeah. But also the fact that they actually made it a North American championship. They didn't just say, oh, we're going to have every round in the US like most places would. No, they made it properly all over. And they've gone to 2 sides of Canada, and they've really focused on making sure they've hit a ton of different places and also going global. He's kind of ticked every box in a championship front. Like, there's nothing I can look at and go, they've missed something. They've looked at everything and taken it into account.
No, very much so. It feels like you've got plenty of, like we were saying before, you can just keep building on this foundation, but it keeps going up to that next level each season, and it keeps going like one-off events, then all over the US, then throwing Europe into the mix there. And you can add as much or as little to that as you want, because you can just go to different American tracks next year. I know Travis is building another track, I think, close to where he lives, and he wants Nitro to go there. But again, equally, anywhere where there's rallying, you can make an argument to have Nitro RX there. So the sky is the limit, essentially, for it.
Absolutely. What about you, Tom? If you could pick anywhere to have a Nitro RX round, where would it be?
World?
Anywhere, yeah. Why not? Let's do the world.
Right. That is difficult. I'd probably say Mexico, actually.
Ooh.
If I could do Mexico, like they waited to do the World Rally Championship in Mexico, but did the rallycross version, I think that would be insane. That would be like a party festival. Great, just do what you want down there, and it's just got a mix of people and everyone have a good time.
Absolutely. I mean, that's not a far stretch. It's still technically, what is that? Central? No, I don't think it's Central America. Or is it still considered North America? It's weird about how everything's separated out here. People say completely different things, so I don't know. But
from a European perspective, I'll say Central.
Yeah.
I'll say people.
Yeah, but I think that's doable. I mean, all they have to do is go fractionally further south. I mean, they're going all over the country at this point, and they're also going outside. I don't see why Mexico's a far cry for like it being difficult, Let's pitch that to Travis for next year.
Getting back to the Nitro Actual from Alberta, though, we'll have a bit of a weekend recap there. We'll start with the Saturday battle brackets, and unfortunately, whilst it did go better for Kris Meeke this weekend, Nabila, Oliver Bennett, his bad luck just kept continuing, and immediately out of the box went Joker before he was allowed to on the first lap when he was going against Conor Martel, so automatically then had to do another Joker lap, which with that delta of around 14 seconds that day meant on a 2-lap race, he was not going to do well at all there.
Oh, no, not at all. I think that whole, as bad as it is to say, the Excite team is kind of struggling. Like, I know Martel's not really considered, he's obviously driving with a Vermont sports car, but he's still under that My Energy bracket, and they just seem to be having a lot of difficulties.
Character building weekends.
Yeah, and they're having too many. But what was really cool is, like, at least Kris then beat Conor Martel in their battle bracket, and their Joker in that instance actually came into play really well. But yeah, it's just one of those things of what can they be doing? It's a bit late in the championship now. There's only one event left.
Yeah, you've got a double weekend, so there's not an awful lot you can do. I think you just have to try and go for it as much as possible and just go for a learning and gain that experience. I mean, we say Meeke beat Marcel, but it was only by 0.031 of a second, which is insane as well, considering the Joker lap there. But Meeke saying afterwards that is essentially a new track every time you go out there. So there is that constant evolution. And I think for them, because of, again, Meeke less so because he's obviously a very experienced racing driver, but this is kind of a new environment for him. You just need to get that experience under the belt. And then hopefully now that they've got a full season behind them almost, then for next year, they should be more prepared for it. And hopefully we can see a bit of a resurgence there, because we keep seeing different podiums, different winners, more or less every other weekend, if not every weekend. And it's a shame we've not got everyone up there yet.
Oh no, I agree. What about you, Tom? What is your thoughts on Kris Meeke's season and like weekend? Knowing him from obviously like the rallying background, like, do you think there's more there? Do you think he's struggling? Do you think he should be struggling, or should he have been on the pace?
I watched him like on the first cut. I've actually watched it all when it kicked off, when it was in Brands Hatch, not Brands Hatch, Lydden Hill down in the UK. And then, of course, the last couple rounds over in Phoenix and Glen Helen. So I've seen the guys develop quite a bit. And Kris, I thought, was the quickest driver on his own, for sure. Like, when he's on his own on the track and he drove that car, he was the only one to set that car up properly to begin with. Like, he somehow got so much weight over the front end of the car. And when he put the brakes on, he had so much rotation to the corner, and he was throwing that car sideways when no one really, to begin with, could get that really powerful car around the corner. It's quite a big car. You see Kris was really working with the testing development side, which you have to do on the rally front quite a bit, and just be adaptable with it. But then I found when the competition came in, rallycross can be quite rough, and it's like you're kind of beating each other, beating the cars up. There's people left, right. I think that's where Kris started to struggle a bit more, is when there's cars coming in from all angles, and he could just kind of like smash into someone else's car, and then someone smash into Kris's car, and it's tricky like that. And I think that's kind of like a classic rally driver going rallycross thing. And Bennett as well, he's a really good driver. When he's in the older super cars, he was always just a good driver in these classes, but I think he might be struggling a bit more with getting used to these electric cars. And you can see some drivers are loving it, and some drivers are not, because the way the gearbox goes, engine braking, non-engine braking, it's a completely different mindset.
I think like Extreme, where you've got the same kind of variety of drivers coming from a lot of different backgrounds, where they are good from where they come from, that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to do well in this new format with these new cars. And you have some of them taking to it a lot easier than others. But again, you've got someone like Kris Meeke, who on paper, like you say, Tom, is incredibly quick and possibly the quickest guy out there. But that doesn't necessarily translate then to when there's 5 or 6 other people sharing the track with you. You're like, what the hell are all these people doing here? They should be back in the garage. But I think, again, it's coming back to that thing I was saying to you earlier, really, you just got to get that experience behind you, get used to them being there, because once you know what the difference is between when you're just going around by yourself, a bit of practice, when you've only got one car up against you for a battle bracket, and then when you've got 3 or 4 or maybe 5 even, you need to just be on that. But again, you've got such a short turnaround as well over these weekends because of the battle brackets, and especially when they do what they did this weekend and add another set of battle brackets in there, that adaptability window needs to come down, because otherwise your whole weekend's potentially compromised.
Yeah, because you're not really going straight out with a ton of people. You're only going against one other person to start off with. You don't have to focus on your positioning of the car so much when you've got 5 people versus when you've only got you and one other person. So if you're winning these battle brackets and then you're ending up in the heats and then you're ending up in the finals, you're not getting that practice, especially if you're not doing so great in the lead up to the finals. You know what I mean? Like, there's 3 options, isn't there? There's last chance qualifying, and then like the winners of the certain ones get put straight through. But it's a lot of change, like, and then adding in another whole battle bracket section on Sunday, that's not really giving these people that aren't used to having a ton of people on the track that kind of consistency, I would say.
And it is especially awkward, if I just skip ahead briefly to Sunday before I recap the rest of Saturday there, that when someone like Bennett does managed to win a battle bracket, and then he's put up against Meeke on the second one as his own teammate, and you're kind of thinking that's a little bit mean, because not only is it the teammate, but it is someone of Kris Meeke's caliber. Where I know he's got to go against someone, but that just seemed a little bit harsh there, because there is only one way that's going to go. But just to recap the rest of Saturday, then you had Fraser, McConnell, and Robin Larson going at it with some great jumps over there. Nice tight battle there, which was excellent. You had Kevin Eriksson beating Oliver Eriksson, which continues that nice little family feud in there. Backwood beat Pastrana in their battle bracket, which it was a shame Pastrana couldn't get a bit further on Saturday, but again, that camo livery that he's got on the car at the moment, it did look perfect for the environment. So I'm just glad we got to see it out there. And then Fraser did beat Meeke, in their semi-final, and Kevin Eriksson was dominant against Backwood then, which is again really interesting to see how, like Meeke was saying before, the track just keeps changing when you're out there. So you got Backwood, who was doing really well against Pastrana, but then not quite 10 minutes later, but equivalent of that in racing time essentially, and Kevin Eriksson just wiped the floor with him. But Nabila, for the second time in a row in Canada, despite the fact that he hadn't driven on ice up until about a month ago at most, Fraser McConnell got top qualifier, third of his career, new record for Nitro RX, and again beat Kevin Eriksson in the process there, who was doing incredibly well up to that point. It's just very Nitro.
Yeah, it's really cool to see someone that comes from a completely different environment. I mean, I think he said he drove on snow for the first time when he flew over to, I think it was Sweden, to do some ice driving for the first time before he went to Quebec. So what was that, like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago? And then coming back straight into a snow round. Like, do you think, Tom, that you have to have a ton of experience? I know Fraser's proving us wrong here, but it's just out of curiosity. Yeah. Do you think like having that extra experience on ice makes that much of a difference? Or if you can handle a car on any surface, you should automatically be able to do it no matter what?
A ton of experience always helps, but if you've got enough confidence, it doesn't matter. If you're confident enough, you believe in yourself on that kind of surface, the more confident you are, the better the car goes and the more grip you get, because the more the stud sinks into the ice. So that guy, he's a confident dude, and he goes for it. So of course that kind of works well for him as the studs are actually getting into the ice, and rather than him going in not very confident, not being a bit shy to it. And when you're shy, you're almost like a downward spiral effect where you lose confidence because there's no grip, and then it takes ages, but it seems like he just threw himself in there.
Do you think part of that with Fraser then, like you say, the lack of experience there means that it probably helps in a way maybe, because he doesn't know what to expect. And these two ice rounds were different in terms of the amount of snow and the amount of ice from one to the other. And he doesn't know where the limits are because he doesn't have that prior knowledge just yet. He's still learning that. So he's more likely to try and push it a bit more. Whereas other drivers, they kind of think, oh, I've done something similar to this. I know kind of how to survive it and to thrive, but we're not going to take those kind of risks where it's like, I don't know what the wrong risks to take are yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think before we get into the Sunday recap, who do you think impressed you the most, Tom, this weekend out of the drivers?
That's a good one. I'd say there was a lot of there was so many people doing so many different things on these events. It's always hard to keep track because you're kind of always following the person you want to follow the most. So for me, it's always going to be Travis, because I'm competing with Travis last year. I'm always seeing what he's up to. But then you got so many other drivers just getting about. But I don't know. They're all pretty good. I'll come back to you on that one.
Okay, sounds good. We'll recap, because I know Thiemo and I are going to talk about the drivers that made our impressive list this week. But then heading into the Sunday battle brackets, we had Bennett beating Backwood. It seems like Bennett just had a better Sunday all around.
It started off better immediately, at least. Yeah. But again, with Backwood as well being the driver to do so well the previous day, it just seemed like what a difference a day makes.
Yeah, absolutely. But then sadly, he got beaten by Meeke, even with a broken suspension he got from going over the jump. So, better in some ways, not so better in other ways. But I'm still hoping, there's another round to go. And if anything, I'm really hoping the Excite team stays on for another year in in the series, and we can just see hopefully Bennett improve so much in the next season, because he's now got a year under his belt, a year in that car. Hopefully they don't go making a million changes to the cars like they do sometimes. I'm hoping it's like kind of stays as is, and we'll see him do better.
Bennett did say that he has full focus on Nitro RX for the foreseeable, and it would be a curious thing to only do one season where you're not going to be up the top and then just leave. It does seem, I mean, it's not unheard of course, but it would seem a bit out of character for someone who's clearly determined to make this work for himself, and with all the teams and sponsorship that they're putting together for it, it does seem like they want to make it work. So I think it's learning year this year, and hopefully at the very least we can see a bit of, even if he doesn't make it all to all the finals next season, he can at least get a bit further up there.
Oh, absolutely. And then we had Kevin Eriksson beating his brother again, Pastrana Fraser by a very, very small margin. That seems to be the case, except for where there was times where this Joker lap really did make a difference. Robin Larson apparently looked like he was milking a cow with the steering wheel, according to Jared.
And it was one of the best bits of commentary I've heard all year.
Yeah, that is actually very amusing. I think what's super funny is watching someone like Larson having a little bit of a not a great weekend, because he's the one that's been dominant, consistent the entire way through. Like, he's just plodded along, and this weekend he kind of fell short.
Yeah, we were talking about this before, and it's kind of saying if anyone else still wants to have a chance to win this championship, he does need to have a bad weekend, and bad for him is just don't finish on the podium, please. And he didn't, so it went weirdly well for us as fans. But just sorry, Robin, we didn't mean to jinx you like that.
No, absolutely not. And then Meeke beating Pastrana. And then it went into, I thought the finals results for that were really cool. Like having Kevin Eriksson win his first. Really awesome to see the two brothers kind of dominating, really, the Canadian rounds. I mean, with Oliver winning the last one and Kevin winning this one. And then finally, Meeke on a podium and in second. This is what I've been hoping to see, because I had very, very high hopes for Kris Meeke going into Rallycross. But I know, as you said, Tom, like it must be really hard for him to be adapting to having so many cars on track, especially when you're used to being in a rally car with only you on the stage at one given time. But it was really nice to see him kind of end up second, and finally Pastrana back on the podium. It's really funny. He's had such a strange season, Pastrana. Like, my expectation for him, knowing a lot of these rounds, would have been podium consistently, but he's kind of been on and off throughout the whole thing, which has made this series really exciting.
Yeah, I'd say the cars are definitely making it not easy for anyone. It's everyone's thrown in the deep end here, and those cars, it doesn't matter who you are and how much experience you have, they're really powerful when they're a big car, and if you throw it in, those guys are all throwing it in broad sideways, and if you get it wrong, or you get it wrong over the jump, you're going to case it and going to break something, or you're going to break someone else's car, and it's quite easy, I think, just to be either winning or losing. It's kind of on and off like that. I think that's what's making that big jump up and down between podiums and not podiums.
Well, again, with that extra edition of the battle brackets on Sunday meant that they had kind of an extra final, which I'm not convinced I got the wording completely right here, because they seem to just put a lot of buzzwords together. So I think it was something along the lines of top 5 speed final, and before you had your super final. And the difference in results there was quite fun. Obviously, you had completely different drivers in both, but again, have that chance and that ability there. So, like you were saying, Nabila, you had Kevin Eriksson winning in the super final with Meeke in second, Pastrana third, whereas in the other kind of this top 5 speed final thing, you had Fraser winning with Oliver Eriksson in second and then Bennett in third. And it was kind of, it's as close as he's gotten to a proper podium all season. And it's like, oh, if you'd only made it to the other race, then we'd have been extra happy for you. But again, it shows that anything can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think,
away from Group B, though, we did also have the NRX next category, which this weekend had its North American final, which I will admit I didn't know was happening, because after the European kind of champion with Tommy Hellman, I didn't think we were having another kind of mini championship in there. But I love that we had that. And I think that is one of the few criticisms we do have with Nitro RX. They do need to make it easier for me to go and find these championship standings, not just for Group E. And I still don't know how points are allocated, so I'd like to know how that all fills out, so I can start doing all kinds of fun graphs and nerding out completely about it. But it was in sport category this weekend, which was interesting because previously we had the side-by-sides in Quebec, and they weren't anywhere to be seen this time. So we had NRX next, which coming into this weekend, George McGuinness was leading the championship with 252 points away from Casper Janssen and Jimmy Henderson in joint second with 226 points apiece, with Lane Michaela with a mathematical chance of clinching it with 195, and Eric Gordon. I think he's having a bit of an Ollie Bennett year. He's there and he's learning, and it's going well. But I'm enjoying that he's sticking with it. The twist to this weekend, though, was that McGuinness wasn't there, so he could have won it without even being there. But spoilers, he didn't. But it's one of those things, and I think the fact that he still could have done it would have been maybe a little bit anticlimactic, because what would you have done with the trophy and the medals and all that kind of thing? So I'm glad it went the way it did, and honestly, Casper Janssen was just completely dominant for the entirety of the weekend. He won his first heat by 5 seconds. He then won his semi-final by 5 seconds again, just really consistent there. And then the other drivers in there kind of battling amongst themselves. Jimmy Henderson, who we had on the podcast, he needed to be taking it to Casper really, and was kind of caught up, unfortunately, with Eric and Lane, and it just kind of didn't work out too much for him. I mean, Michaela did have the unfortunate thing of also jump starting on one of the races, so we had to do 2 joker laps in the last chance qualifier, which in a last chance qualifier is the opposite of what you want. So Henderson naturally won that with Gordon in second, and then Michaela, to add insult to injury, did spin a bit as well on the last chance qualifier, so it really that outside chance kept getting slimmer and slimmer as the weekend was going on there. But then Casper Janssen just won the race on Sunday with Henderson in P2. So again, close, but the one driver he needed to definitely beat, unfortunately, couldn't. Michaela P3 and Gordon P4. So it was a bit awkward. So he won in Calgary and became North American NRX next champion, which is a bit of a mouthful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But what's crazy is Casper Janssen and Jimmy Henderson, they went in on exactly the same points, like.
For such a small field, it's pretty impressive.
6. Yeah. But also, I am kind of a little bit sad that just by George not being able to make this round, again, we don't know why. I mean, we don't know. I've not looked into it personally. But it's kind of a shame when he's been so dominant the whole season, and it has really been him and Casper Janssen that are like, I think, the shoe-ins to win this brand new category that I had personally never heard of. But it's sad to see that just because he wasn't there, that he didn't get a chance to win it, especially when he was the most consistent throughout and had the most points. But awesome to see that Casper Janssen did end up winning it, because he's had a solid season. It's always been him and George fighting for it at the top. Didn't realize Jimmy Henderson had that much of a chance, and real shame that he couldn't capitalize on that, because it could have been anyone's game at that point when they're on exactly the same points. One just had to win and one just had to be second, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, it went Casper's way versus Jimmy's, but exciting to see. And I'm excited to see more of like the NRX next year. And I'm hoping more drivers enter that category, because I think it's such a great support category, but also an incredible kind of like, almost you could consider it like that junior level building up for you to be able to get into Group E. It's like that nice place that the drivers can come in, hone their skills, and then progress as they want. And I really hope that if they do end up doing a global championship again, and we have Europeans and we have Americans, I want to see more of a cross championship, rather than you can just enter the European rounds and you can enter the American rounds. I'd love to see it being an all-rounded kind of thing, and there being an overall next champion, you know?
No, definitely. And I think going back to what you're saying about George there, it's one of those things where it would have been nice to have it there, but the benefit of not having there was that, okay, Casper did dominate the weekend, but if he hadn't, Lane Michaela could have still snuck in there and done this absolutely thing. And you have 1 round difference there. It shows just how close it still really is there, even with the other 2 of Henderson and Janssen being up there on equal points. And again, it adds that little bit. And what you're saying about the championship there, I think maybe treat it a little bit like fantasy Formula One, in that you have your overarching championship, but then we're going to have a special mini championship inside that for just the American races or just the European races, because that way you can cater to all the markets quite nicely, but you still have the overall narrative where because I think some of the reason that we didn't get all the drivers for all of the rounds is probably budget, and they're more European based or they're more American based, and they can thrive in those environments, but they're not going to make it the whole way. Whereas if you have drivers such as in the Group E category, where you know that they're probably going to be making it for the whole time, unless you're just one of these Johan Kristoffersens, I'll come in for Sweden and then leave again. You need that element to it. And I think this is one of those things where you only learn that in a first season and you're looking back on what worked, what didn't, what can we incorporate for next year, and so on and so forth. But I think before we get into drivers that impressed us the most for Group E, Kasper Jansen is definitely the driver that impressed me and probably you the most this weekend, because he's also only in his second season of doing this kind of racing, and it's very impressive.
Oh, absolutely. I think, sorry, excuse me, all of these drivers that have been in this category have impressed me by the fact that, I mean, they're kids. Some of these people are literally kids. Like, it was awesome seeing Tommy and Michaela and everything come in during the European rounds. The only reason I say I'd love to see kind of like that hybrid overall is because it does give those drivers more of a chance. Absolutely, keep the European, keep them North American, but let's do an overarching and try and entice more of these drivers over. Maybe there's a way you can make it like every round you win, you get some form of monetary value that attaches that allows you to be able to move. Some rallies have that. You can get a certain amount of money if you become 1, 2, or 3, and that just makes them push more, obviously, to win or get second and third, and also can then help them to continue their championships onwards.
I think that what you're describing is essentially the bones of an off-season podcast that we can do, where we go back and look at all of the first season across, not just Nitro RX, NRX next, and Group E, and side-by-sides, and see, okay, this and this worked, this and this didn't. What if we were in charge, which we're not, but, you know, maybe you'll be able to influence Street Bike Tommy, who can influence someone, who knows? And then we can see what we can build on for the second season, because there's no point in just scrapping it all and starting from scratch when there's perfectly good parts of this that work really well, and you just like 1 or 2 tweaks here or there, like you say. So I think quite a satisfying conclusion if we don't get any more from them for this round. I don't know if we see them in the US or if we see just the side-by-sides back, or if we just get one of these kind of exhibition rounds where it's like, I'll just come and have some fun, and you can have, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, like, you see those old non-championship Grand Prix where you're just going to these far-flung places and you just have a nice time and you're like, yeah, I won in Morocco or wherever, and just like you get bragging rights.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think that like leads us swiftly back to drivers that impressed us, which is an exciting one for me. And it is Meeke. Surprise, surprise. I've already said it before. It was just nice to see him being consistent for the first time in a little while, but also ending up second. It's awesome to see, and I'm hoping, you know, this brings his confidence up, and by the last round we potentially could see a win, because I am all for the having so many different winners. I mean, we've had almost 7 different winners. I can't remember now exactly the number because I'm losing track of rounds here, but you've had Oliver, you've had Kevin, you've had Travis, you've had Larson. Like, wouldn't it be nice if that final round had a completely different winner?
It would be, and I don't want to say who it would be because then I'll definitely jinx them, so I'm just going to shush on that one.
Yeah, anybody who's not already won is who I want to win that last round. I don't care who, just provided they've not won a round. That's what I'm after.
Other drivers that impressed me from that category, at least for me, again, I kind of have to go with Fraser on that one, just because of what we'd said before, King of the Snow again, and just very impressive that he's able to do that with such minimal experience, like we were talking about.
Absolutely. And back to you, Tom.
Yeah, that's actually, thinking about it now, Fraser, to get that result he got to, even being that close to everyone like Travis and not having any experience like down the stud, you have to give it to him there. That is a really tough task to do, and just how powerful those cars are, and being in like the deepest end you could ever think of. It's not even just being on a nice lake and doing your own thing. It's the most powerful rallycross cars has ever been on a full ice rink. So yeah, I'd have to give it to Fraser to get the result he got to.
No, definitely. And again, kind of sets things up quite nicely for the final race of the season that'll be in March, back in the USA then. Although we may be a man down because Treat by Tommy looked like he wanted to move to Canada after his various interactions with the crowd there. He seemed to be falling in love with the place so much there, which I think to quote him, ice racing, beer and cheesy gravy fries. What more can you want from this? I love this country. So, maybe there's a job going there soon.
Absolutely. And any thoughts on Alberta and Nitro as a whole? And kind of like, if you had the chance to get involved, what category are you going to be in?
Yeah, no, I think it's been a great championship. I think it had a bit of a rocky start to begin with the whole European jump starting in Leaden Hill, which is cool and is great. It's got a historic aspect. But I think if you want to do this and have a grand announcement of the championship and where it left off with before, with the giant jumps and how it is, and you can only do that in America, really, or Canada. You're not going to do that in the UK. It's fun, but there'll be a time and place for it. But at this rate, it just needs to be the full American show of Trav building jumps, amazing tracks, live streaming it, TV, sponsors, Street by Tommy, the presenting in between, just making it fun around all the fans. So it's getting all those basics really well and really good. And then I'm just interested in where it's going the following season. So I've heard a lot more where they've kind of learned a lot with the classes, with the side-by-sides, and how they're going to integrate the Arrive and Drive celebrity bit. And then there's the people who are pro side-by-side racers. So that it separates, because it's getting a bit dangerous there, where you get a really experienced side-by-side with a influencer who's never driven one of these cars for the first time. That's when you get a big crash. So there's a lot going on, and for next year I think it's going to be really exciting, and I definitely want to get involved. But for sure, I think side by side would be a good start for me, and then see how I get on and actually learn how to do rallycross properly.
Absolutely, that sounds awesome. Well, thank you, Tom, for joining us on this week's episode. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and also kind of getting that different take from someone who's still currently competing and trying to get into Nitro themselves.
Yeah, of course. No, it's great to hear you guys and see what you thought of the championship, and glad I could say what I thought. And yeah, it's definitely exciting and it's a good place to be. And yeah, I want to see where it all goes.
In the meantime, we'll be back next week with an episode that is just an interview episode, actually, with Ben Mayer, which was a very interesting chat with him from such a young driver. So keep a lookout for that. In the meantime, all the details for where you can find Nabila and I will be in the description below this episode, wherever you're watching or listening to it. And if Tom's got anywhere he wants to plug, we'll make sure we stick that in the description as well to keep everyone nice and happy there. So thank you all very much for watching and listening, and we'll see you again soon.